The ceasefire in Gaza has shifted Israel's attention back to Iran. New satellite imagery suggests Tehran may be rebuilding parts of its nuclear infrastructure south of Natanz. This even as President Donald Trump in his Knesset address said he doesn't believe Iran is restarting its program, insisting they just want to survive.
Even to Iran, whose regime has inflicted so much death on the Middle East, the hand of friendship and cooperation is open. I'm telling you, they want to make a deal. That's all I do in my life, I make deals.
Now, that optimism has raised eyebrows inside Israel's defense establishment. While Washington signals a turn toward diplomacy, Israeli officials warn that Iran's nuclear drive and its proxies are far from contained. So what's really happening behind the scenes? And could a new war of attrition between Israel and Iran be ahead?
The starting point of the next war will be the ending point of the previous one, meaning it will be very violent from the get-go.
Joining me from Tel Aviv is Danny Citrinowicz, the former head of the Iran branch for Israeli military intelligence, now a senior researcher at the Institute for National Security Studies and a non-resident fellow with the Atlantic Council's Middle East program.
Definitely it will lead to more casualties from the civilian side.
I'm Negar Moshehedi, and this is Eye for Iran. Danny Citrinowicz joins us now on Eye for Iran. Thank you so much for being here, Danny.
Thank you for inviting me.
Now, Danny, drawing on your years leading the Iran branch with the Israeli military intelligence, how do you interpret President Trump's recent speech at the Knesset and his confidence when he said that the Islamic Republic of Iran, quote, they're not starting anything, referring obviously to their nuclear ambitions, and they just want to survive?
Yeah, I think when you're looking at the American policy towards Iran, definitely the President Trump policy regarding Iran, I think it's packed with this misunderstanding regarding the Iranian behavior. I think that basically President Trump wants to reach an agreement with Iran, he said that constantly, but he really thinks that you can overcome the ideological differences between the US and Iran and just offer Iran money and then they will capitulate. This is one mistake that he's actually repeatedly doing. And the other mistake that he's doing, that he thinks that Iran is weakened after the war. Now, definitely Iran suffered a severe blow in the Rising Lion war. But I think from the decision-making process and the leadership, I think they consider themselves still strong. And definitely they're not willing to capitulate to the US. So what we're seeing now is President Trump demanding a concession that the Islamic Republic actually cannot accept. So despite the fact that both sides, I think, basically wants to reach an agreement, their present stands are not allowing agreement to be reached. And I think what President Trump said in Israel is actually highlight that. Yeah, he said, I want to reach an agreement. I want that Iran will join Abraham Accords because we think that they are weak in terms of the economy. So they will join the Abraham Accords, misunderstanding.
Yeah, the Abraham Accords was a bit strong.
Yeah,
as an Iranian, I can.
There is no way that the Islamic Republic of Iran will join Abraham Accords recognizing the state of Israel. So I think it's actually what I understood from this speech, that despite the fact that they want to reach an agreement, the current position and the misunderstanding about Iran and the Iranian behavior and ideology probably will lead to another confrontation. And I think that it's obvious that the Iranians are rebuilding their capabilities. You just need to see from the satellite images in Natanz and Fordo and near Natanz that actually they are cleaning, doing stuff. So definitely we are reaching another round of escalation. President Trump highlighted that even last night when he mentioned about the fact that they are trying to rebuild themselves. So what the bottom line of things that, yes, the US wants to reach an agreement, but I think they will find themselves in another escalation with Iran quite soon.
Yeah, and they're digging even deeper, according to open source intelligence, even deeper than Fordo right now, just south of Natanz. So who do you suppose then, given your knowledge being both in Washington and Israel, who is advising President Trump on Iran? Because there are a lot of Iran hawks. And as a journalist, I know, somebody like Secretary of State Marco Rubio, who understands the motivations of the Islamic Republic of Iran.
I think another problem that they're facing now in the Washington, that I'm not sure that those who are advising President Trump really understand Iran and really understand how to negotiate with the Islamic Republic of Iran. Take for example, Witkoff. And I'm sure Witkoff, is a good guy. He's have a lot of support in Israel. He actually push the deal to return back our hostages. We have great appreciation for him, but I don't think he understands Iran. I don't think he has the knowledge. I don't even think that he understands enrichment, what it means for the Iranian decision makers. So I think that they lack actually the right expertise that actually will help them in that. Because I think the tragedy is that you can really reach an agreement between the US and Iran. I think that the Iranians are willing to submit substantial compromises on the enrichment, of course, demanding to leave the right to enrich. That goes without saying. But from the American side, because there are no Iranian experts from one hand, on the other hand, no experts that actually were in a negotiation with Iran in the past, leading to the fact that this administration, even if he wants to reach an agreement, he cannot, because they don't understand it. They don't understand actually where the Iranians are coming from. So unfortunately, I think and even if he has someone that actually help him understand Iran, they are more like the hawks that really think that you can solve everything with Iran by the force of, kinetic force, using another B-2 bombers attack or whatever.
So both are kind of getting it wrong, is what you're saying, right? Both are not.
Exactly. And so both really don't understand, A, that Iran is really to concessions, but B, the Iranians won't forgo the basic things that actually hold this regime. For example, right to enrich, and definitely won't limit their missile capabilities. So unfortunately, again, it goes back to the lack of understanding and knowledge, and that actually leading to this administration that I believe he really wants to reach an agreement with Iran, to a stalemate that won't lead to anything else. And while looking what the Iranians doing now in Natanz and Fordo, like you highlighted, and south of Natanz, in a new enrichment plant that they are building, actually, at the end of the day, again, I don't see other way rather than another escalation between Israel, US, and Iran.
Wow. So you think we're headed into and what would that war look like then? A war of attrition? How do you see? Because each time it's just going to escalate. Like, remember back in April of 2024, Israel's response was very light. Then the next round, it escalated again. And that's just the nature of war.
You're absolutely right. We don't know how it will look like, but I'm afraid, and I wrote about it also in Israel, that I'm afraid that it would look quite different from the previous war, the Rising Lion War, because of the fact that the Iranians are, A, well prepared, and B, I think they learned a lot from the friction with Israel. So that what they're trying to do now, we see that every day they're doing missile tests. They're trying new launching capabilities. So definitely what they're trying to do, they're trying to improve their capabilities. I think that they are quite emboldened comparing for what happened in the war itself. We thought that we are winning, but I think they understood that they suffered severe blows, but they, in their notion, they also won. The regime didn't being toppled. This is one aspect. And they managed to hit Israel until the last day of the war. So I think that what will happen is we'll have escalatory event, meaning that the starting point of the next war will be the ending point of the previous one, meaning it will be very violent from the get-go. And I really think that there won't be a mechanism that will allow us to close it, because unlike previously when the US force decides to close it, I think that now the Iranians won't be willing to close it until they will feel they balance the equation of deterrence with Israel. And that is why I think that next war will be much more violent and longer than we anticipated or we predicted in the past. And unfortunately, again, because I don't see an agreement soon between Iran and the US, and because of the Israeli threats that we're going to attack again if the Iranians will try to build their enrichment capabilities, and because we see that, and President Trump talking about it, that returning back to enrichment, then the clash, I find it very hard, in terms of scenarios, what will take to prevent the future escalation. And this is another problem that we took when we launched the Rising Lion campaign. Because once we did that, we are forcing ourselves to some sort of, like we did in Syria, what we called a war between the wars. We have to, the whack-a-mole, we have to hit them again because they are rebuilding the capabilities, and we want to prevent that. This is why we initiated the war in the first place. So we are forcing ourselves to another and another war, and the Iranians want back, because for them, foregoing missiles, foregoing enrichment is foregoing the regime itself. And this is why I think that escalation is almost imminent.
Well, like you said, a game of whack-a-mole, right? Until you get, I guess, so to speak, the job done. When you say imminent, what is that timeline specifically, do you think?
Again, it's very hard. I've been asked a lot about the timeline. People in Israel are quite afraid, especially when our previous defense minister, Lieberman, talked about the fact that we have to be near our bomb shelters, house, or whatever. But I think it really depends on two main things. First, the rate of the Iranians rebuilding the capabilities, the enrichment one, because I don't think that in terms of rebuilding their missile capabilities, will launch a war against them. I think it's everything depending on the nuclear, because the US won't allow us to go to that only on the conventional one. So everything depending on the nuclear efforts, rebuilding efforts of the Iranians. So A, the rate, and B, and this is really more importantly, when the US will allow Israel to attack again. Now, it's really depending also of what the Iranians will do, but I think it's also depending on how the US feel that they might, I don't know, reach an agreement or conduct some sort of negotiation with the Iranians. So it can be weeks, it can be months, it can be towards 2026, I don't know. But I think that in a time scale of, let's say, half a year, I think we'll be there, because as I see how the Iranians are acting now, especially now they're doing with the tankers and the transponders, I think they're feeling quite emboldened. And if they are emboldened in sea, they'll be emboldened in the enrichment side. I don't think they will forgo that. They will show everyone that they have the capacity to do so. This is why I think the timeline is between weeks and months, that we'll find ourselves in another clash, again, depending on the backing of the US for Israel. But that my sense is that given the rate of them working in Natanz and Fordo, it's between weeks and months. That's my personal assessment.
Wow. So definitely within the Trump administration timeline,
Definitely.
definitely. And when you say more violent, are we going to see more innocent civilians on both sides being killed? Because I know, for example, whenever we interview, Israeli officials, the government, the line is always, well, we're at war with the Islamic Republic. We love the people of Iran. But of course, despite any targeted strikes, still innocent people die. And that's always, when you ask about that, the Israeli government says, well, that's collateral damage. Are we going to expect to see more civilian loss on both sides?
No, definitely. I think, look, from the Iranian side, they tried to hit Israel, period. They didn't try to hit, maybe they tried to hit military sites or whatever, but definitely the outcome was missile landing in civilian surroundings. And given the assessment that maybe, hopefully not, but again, the assessment that they will prove the capacity or capabilities to launch more missiles to the state of Israel, and Israel is a very small country, as you know, definitely it will lead to more casualties from the civilian side. Now, for the Iran, because it will be violent from the get-go, and I think what Israel tried to do, like our leader said that they tried to topple the regime. Then, if you want to topple the regime, you have to be more violent in the way that you're attacking the pillars of the regime. So this is why I think that we'll see more aggressive behavior from Israel, trying to see how they can topple the regime. So I think the outcome of this is that we'll see more violence in terms of the activity, more people getting hit. And I think, unfortunately, the war will be longer because of the lack of mechanism that will enable us to close the war. So I have only, again, I'm trying to be not that pessimistic, but unfortunately, if we find ourselves in another clash with Iran, and I think the probability, like I mentioned, is quite high, then I think it will be much worse in terms of civilian casualties than before. I hope that I'm mistaken, but as I see things going right now, and as I see the Iranians, look, in Israel, we have wrong perception. We are saying we won. We didn't win anything. We had major achievements. But from the Iranian standpoint, we think, oh, doing that for propaganda. I don't think they're doing it for propaganda. I think that the leadership really believe that they have major achievements. They understood that they are being penetrated. But I think that they have the capacity in their mind to build a deterrence equation with Israel. And they are working on that right now. And the fact that they're emboldened, the tankers issue is really unique in the way they're saying, come get us. So in that aspect, I think that because of the emboldenment of the Iranians and how Israel think about a future war, okay, we did it once, we can do it again, then it will be a clash, there will be a clash, and there will be a lot of violence within that clash.
That's a good point, because I think to myself, why are they so emboldened after being weakened so severely in their proxies? It's like you said, they actually believe it.
Yeah, definitely they believe. At the beginning, I thought to myself that that's telling them their own story. But I really think taking a look, first and foremost, the basic policy of the Islamic Republic of Iran didn't change. Yes, there are debates, strong debates, sorry, between the more, let's say, moderate voices, Rouhani, Zarif, Pezeshkian, talking about the need to interact with the West, and because those are the lessons learned from the attack, from the war. And you can see, of course, the IGC, the conservatives are much more like, we have to go Russia, we have to go China, forget the West, look at the snapback, and all those things. Now, the Supreme Leader definitely support the more conservative side of things, that actually believes that yes, we were penetrated, we suffered a severe blow, but like I mentioned, we had major achievements in the war. We hit Israel, we hit them hard, we hit Qatar, we managed to sustain ourselves. I heard people saying, again, I don't know if it's true or not, but I heard people saying that if Khamenei would have known that the situation is as it is towards the end of the war, he wouldn't accept any ceasefire, because they thought that they have the ability to hit Israel harder and harder, because in their mind, Israel defense was weakened. So when you're coming from that notion, then definitely you want to return back and hit harder towards your enemy. So, and also saying to people in Israel, when we are saying we won, it doesn't say that the other side thinks that he lost. And because both sides think that they won and they have the capacity to do that again, and given the tension, the war ended with no agreement. It just they forced us to end the war, and that's it.
Almost like
But
a pause, right?
yes, exactly. It's not it's a ceasefire, it's a pause, and we are on circle, and that is very dangerous, because the level of destruction that Iran can cause to Israel is big. Same thing goes to Israel and Iran. So I think that we are, again, we're in some sort of a path to escalation that we cannot return back, because once we did the attack, like you mentioned, from 2024, the first Iranian attack, second Iranian attack, Israel attack, we're on the path for another attack, because of the notion in Iran that they have major achievements and definitely didn't lose the war.
And when you said more aggressive behavior and the sense of going for the pillars of the Islamic Republic, the regime itself, would that actually result in toppling the Islamic Republic, or would it lead into some sort of like kind of failed state?
I think that, I'm amazed when I'm looking also, returning back to my years also in the army, but we have an amazing understanding operationally on Iran. Look what happened on the Raising Line. We killed Bayri in his house, Salami. We managed to kill Haji Zadeh in his
While they're
bunker
sleeping.
Yeah, and all of the nuclear scientists, or most of them, so our operational knowledge is very, very good. But strategically, I don't think we understand how the regime is working. Now, to think that you can topple this regime in 12 days of bombing from the air, this is naive way of thinking. Now, again, I don't think that this regime is not enjoying overwhelming support. It has a lot of major problems towards its population. The droughts, the everything related to the
Electricity,
poverty, the inflation, electricity, energy. Things, drugs from Afghanistan, the Baluchis from the Pakistani border. They have mounting problems. But, and that is a real but, there is no opposition to this regime. Now, Israel is betting on, the monarchist or Pahlavi. Good luck with that. I don't think he said in his interviews he doesn't want to return back to Iran. So there is no real opposition. So we can weaken this regime, definitely. But nobody can march on the streets and replace it. Now, attacking a Evin prison, thinking what? People will march from Evin prison to the Supreme Leader's office? This is so naive. Now, from one hand, we can strike everything moving in Iran. We need the launchers, the missiles. We kill the senior leadership. Amazing. But we really think that we can create the surroundings that will lead to this regime to be toppled. This is so naive. And I'm afraid that this naive point of view return back again hopefully not, but if we find ourselves in a second war with Iran. And we should be very, very careful of that. Because once you're setting the stage and you're saying, this is my target to topple this regime, you are forcing yourself to war of attrition. And we have to remember, Israel had major achievements. What we suffered economically, people were killed in Israel. We have to remember that. And of course, we were on a lockdown. We couldn't leave Israel because we are a small country, two airports, everything was closed. So we want to return back to that for weeks, maybe months. For what? For putting some sort of a purpose or target that we cannot fulfill. We have to accept the fact that this regime will, if it will be toppled, it will be toppled internally. And I really think that after Khamenei, when he'll die, there will be a regime change because Khamenei is so dominant in the way of thinking. And there are debates within Iran itself that actually highlight the fact that Iran is not a monolith. Netanyahu said when Rouhani was president, he said, oh, he's a wolf in sheep clothing. No, he's not a wolf in sheep clothing. He really believes in interacting with the West. He couldn't care less about Israel. But the thing is that in Israel, we are very black and white towards Iran. And actually, I'm afraid that this will push us again to another war that actually with no ending. And we have to be very cautious about that.
Yeah, and you mentioned there are nuances in Iran still. And there's even debates now we're seeing in Iranian media that they're reporting on an apparent split over Trump's Middle East peace push, with hardliner outlets calling the Sharm el-Sheikh shameful, while reformists are saying, we missed a huge opportunity for negotiations for potentially the lifting of sanctions. From your perspective, what does that division reveal about Iran? And again, these nuances of not being so black and white.
Definitely. And you have Nata Knuri talking about the fact that you shouldn't take over the U.S. embassy in 1979.
That's huge. That is big. That's a big deal.
That is a big deal. Yeah, of course, Nata Knuri is not calling any shot today in Iran. But he was a senior guy. It was some sort of Rouhani camp in a way. But those debates show us one important thing, that we shouldn't underestimate the inner discussion within Iranian leadership. Like I mentioned before, Iran is not a monolith. Even this regime is not monolith. Ali Larijani, when he appointed him, you cannot compare him to Pakpour, to the commander of the agency. You cannot, yes, they're supporting the regime, both of them. But the way of thinking and how to secure this regime is totally different. Same thing as Zarif and whatever. So I think that we have to understand that this debate is real. Now, again, we have to acknowledge the fact that Khamenei, as long as he's there, is not supporting of them going to Sharm el-Sheikh or interaction with the US unless they're doing some sort of discussion on the nuclear deal. But I think this is out of the fact that in the days after Khamenei, it can be after Khamenei will die, or if he stopped functioning as the leader in a way because of health issues, then this debate can call the shots for the future of the Iran revolution. This is why I thought that leaving the JCPOA was a very bad thing. Because we didn't have any strategy to counter it, but to weaken those in the leadership, especially Rouhani and Zarif, that really thought differently about the way of the regime itself. Now, again, I don't think that Rouhani is pacifist. I don't think that he's a Zionist. And I think that he really thinks that there is a need to strengthen Iran, and Israel is an enemy of the revolution. I have no doubt about it. But I really think that he understands, again, to interact with the West. Same thing as Pezeshkian. So I think these debates are important to follow. These debates are important to understand that the war actually expedite the inner discussion of regarding the policy need to be adopted by the regime itself. And that is very important because when Khamenei will be weakened, and we'll see more and more debates about it, regarding who's going to replace him, I think those debates will be crucial. This is why I don't think that just hitting in the head of the Islamic Republic is a good thing. Again, I'm not an Iranian supporter. I'm supporter of the Iranian public. I'm not supporting of this regime. But I think that, for example, weakening the middle class in Iran, weakening the moderates in Iran, actually won't help us. Because, as I mentioned, there is no opposition. There is no Halavi that we would take over and say, let's build a diplomatic relationship with Israel. There is no option like that. And I really want that to happen, but it won't happen. But there are people within Iran that think differently about the policy, about the West. We have to support them. And when Khamenei will disappear, then it will be the time, hopefully, for them to take over. Now, I know the RGC is strong, whatever, but in the other day, the RGC have to hear what the population has in mind. He doesn't want to fight the population. So I think that there is a chance, and I think in terms of possibilities, the higher possibility is not a regime that change that we saw in 79, but a regime change that will see more moderate voices taking over the decision-making process in Iran.
A change within the regime itself that may lead to
Exactly.
ultimate change,
Exactly.
which is on the horizon. Because
Exactly.
I mean, Khamenei is 86. Like, how many years can somebody live? Right. So
Definitely, and we don't know. I think, by the way, I think that the war changed him a little bit. I think he's weaker. I still think he controls Iran. It goes without saying. I don't think that that Iran. I heard people saying that Iran is now being handled by other people and not Khamenei. I think Khamenei is still very strong. He's still very dominant. But the war has taken its toll. I think he suffered severe blow personally because people that we decapitate, the people he knows for years, he appreciated them. So I think that the war changed him, but he still control Iran. But definitely, he has cancer. He's going. He's 86. I think that the end, when he will die, that will be a real regime change because Khamenei, more than Khomeini, actually built the Islamic revolution in a way that we see it today. So I think that he's a monumental leader in terms of his influence on Iran. Him disappearing, that will be a major vacuum that will be created within Iranian leadership. And then we have to see how things will be developing there. But definitely, his diminishing power towards maybe the near future, whatever, that will have more influence on the decision-making process in Iran rather than Israel bombing the pillars of the regime and trying to create some sort of a mayhem that will lead to a regime change. I don't believe in that whatsoever.
It leads to more confrontation is what you're saying, and more of a cycle of violence and innocence being caught.
Exactly.
And like you mentioned, when you look at the statistics, if you look at pre-JCPOA years and post with all the sanctions, the middle class has shrunk by more than 20%. And how can the middle class rise up against all of this repression if they're coming from a position of weakness and they're more worried about putting food on their table?
Listen, I think that the old policy regarding Iran was problematic from begin with. Again, I'm not saying that putting pressure on the regime is not important. I think it's important.
Of course,
but I think you have to remember. But I think you have to remember who is going to be the generator of change in Iran. Definitely, it will be the middle class. We know that in the past. So I think that you choose those things that can hurt the regime, but not hurt the middle class. Now, again, you have to be smart in what you're doing. Don't look at everything and just push everything towards Iran because, look. At the end of the day, what will happen is what's happening right now. The regime is more conservative in terms of its behavior, and the middle class is being a lot of struggle in terms of because of everything that's being thrown at Iran. So I think we have to be much more smarter in how we are behaving towards Iran in the future. I really think that agreement with Iran regarding on the nuclear issue is extremely important because I'm not afraid about lifting sanctions and companies coming to Iran because that is a threat to the regime much more than the current situation. When the JCPOA was signed or was agreed, Khamenei wrote a letter to Rouhani saying to himself, "Oh, you have to make sure that the West won't trickle the ideas of the West won't trickle down to the Iranian youth." This is what he is afraid of because of the West penetrating. I'm talking about militarily, I'm talking about culturally penetrating Iran. And I think that if Iran will if sanctions will be lifted and Iran will be open, they won't able to sustain that because there are so many companies, investors that will come to Iran itself. So I think, again, I'm not saying pressure is not right, it depends when, but I really think that if Iran will be willing to significantly limit its nuclear capacity, and I think they're willing to do so as long as you give them some sort of right to interest, some sort of a safe face mechanism, and lifting sanctions, I don't think that in terms of oh my God, what Iran will do. I think at the end of the day, it will encourage the middle class. I think it will show people the tangible earning of working with the West. And I really think that it can change Iran for the good. I don't believe that constant pressure will leading to somewhere positive, because we saw in the war, we had a war, a successful war, whatever. But war, you have to pay a price, and like I said in the beginning, the war leads to another war. And so I don't think that just putting pressure on Iran is the solution.
Yeah, and some studies have shown that when there was private ownership in Iran coming from foreign companies, like you mentioned, the people were less reliant on the regime and on that government because they were able to invest in those companies and work for foreign entities as well. So it was less reliance on the regime.
Exactly. You're absolutely right. Totally the same.
And when you look at Iran's rhetoric, like you said, when you look at the Gaza peace talks sort of holding in place right now, and Trump's outlook towards wanting some sort of nuclear negotiation, as he said, and then Israel's outlook on Iran, what does that do to the relationship between Israel and the United States? Are they aligned when it comes to Iran? I mean, we could hear all the cheers and the clapping when Trump was speaking at Knesset, but what's it really like behind the scenes from where you're at in Israel right now?
Well, definitely we were aligned. The attack of Fordo was really. I didn't think in my lifetime that I will see the Americans attacking in Iran. But now, again, basically, we're not aligned. We have to remember that the U.S. wanted to secure an agreement with Iran. Israel against any agreement with Iran, because any agreement with Iran, including one that will limit the Iranian nuclear capacity or capabilities, is of course accompanied by lifting of sanctions. So Israel is against that totally. So basically, we are not aligned. But there is the big question that I'm asking myself, and again, that will lead us, yes or no, to the future war with Iran, whether U.S. will be willing to back Israel again in attacking Iran. And I don't know the answer for that, but I think it's a crucial question to ask. But basically, we have to remember that President Trump, his interest is reaching an agreement. He is a president of peace. And Israel is not interested in any agreement with Iran, because we believe that any agreement will strengthen this regime and strengthen the axis. So I think there is a gap. The real question is whether the US will be willing to support Israel if Israel will decide to strike Iran again, because as I mentioned before, the Iranians are building their capacity.
So, Danny, when it comes to this non-alignment between the United States and Israel when it comes to Iran, as you've described it, how far would you go in your assessment to give us an idea of the magnitude of this gap?
I think it is a strategic gap, and it's connected not only to President Trump, but actually when you're turning back even to the days of President Obama. At the end of the day, the US administration wants to do one thing, to reach one thing: an agreement with Iran that will prevent Iran from developing a nuclear bomb. It was never about changing the regime. This is why when the US actually introduced all of the sanction mechanism, the real goal of this mechanism was not to topple this regime, but actually to reach an agreement. This is why we had such a crisis between Netanyahu and Obama regarding a JCPOA, because Israel really think that these sanctions actually meant to topple the regime. Israel couldn't care less about an agreement regarding the nuclear field. For Israel, the real change will happen when this regime will be toppled. Now, even if we talk about rising line, people think, okay, we were aligned with the US. I don't think we were aligned with the US. US intention was to weaken Iran. I think the US understood in negotiation in Oman that Iran has no intention of foregoing the right to enrich. So Trump thought, like he's thinking now with the tomahawks with Zelensky, that I will weaken the adversary, and then the adversary will have to return back much more weakened, and then he will agree to my demands in the negotiation. But for Israel, as we know, from day 3 or 4, Israel thought, and we see now the protocols, the Israeli leadership really thought about toppling this regime. So I think this is an important element, because looking into the future, if Israel will come to the US and say we want to change this regime, I don't think we'll get the green line from the US to initiate the war. I think it has to be basically on the nuclear side. Now, we have to remember that, because when President Trump standing in the Knesset, talking about embedding Iran to the Abraham Accords, he really think in the ways of I'm a peacemaker. Even if when I'm instructing the midnight hammer thing. I did that for the Iranian returning back to the negotiating table with no
And that's how he
enrichment,
wants
with
to
no cards.
define himself. He wants to define his presidency with that too.
Exactly. And we have to, if you have to understand that if he thinks that Israel wants to turn back to the war and to topple this regime, I don't think we'll have a green light from him. Now, we have to remember one other thing. When we were doing the war, we had a very big operation happening when President Trump forced us to stop the airplanes from flying to Iran, reverse them, and then returning back to Israel. So he had this kind of power. So I think that this gap is genuine, despite the fact that you work together in terms of bombing Iran in a way. I think this gap cannot be. You cannot ignore this fact because at the end of the day, strategically speaking, the U.S. even President Trump, even in his first term, he wanted to invite Zarif to the White House.
And Khamenei, he wanted to shake Khamenei's hand in Tehran.
Yeah.
Good
whatever.
luck.
And we can laugh about it, but I think the problem is really highlight the fact that he doesn't know the Iranians. He really thinks that if you can offer them money, it will overcome any ideological differences. And you cannot do that, unfortunately. Now, for Khamenei, he already drank the poison chalice. For him, just allowing the negotiators to meet with the U.S. to discuss the nuclear side, that is the compromise for itself. But you understand that he's doing that for the future of this regime. But this is where it ends. He's not able to accept Pezeshkian meeting with Trump or working in Sharm el-Sheikh with some sort of peace deal with the Americans that recognize the state of Israel. It's not this regime. This is why I think that despite the President Trump wish or willingness that he wants to reach an agreement, his misunderstanding about the behavior and what really drives the Islamic Republic of Iran will lead, unfortunately, to probably, the chances are more towards the confrontation than some sort of a political deal between both countries.
And it's really interesting because in that Knesset speech, Trump said that Iran was 2 months away from having a bomb prior to the 12-day war. But then in a recent Fox News interview, Prime Minister Netanyahu said, no, it was closer to a year, actually. So given your knowledge, you've studied Iran's nuclear infrastructure for years. What is more credible here in terms of those claims?
I don't understand where the 2 months coming from. What we know, what Israel actually claimed, that Netanyahu said that in the Fox interview, like you mentioned, that in the end of the day, what we had a group of scientists, some of them were in the Amat project with Mohsen Fakhrizadeh, that decided if Khamenei would decide to build a bomb. Nobody said that he decided to build a bomb. So the notion of they're rushing to a bomb. Nobody rushed to a bomb in Iran. Israel is saying that, not me. We are saying that those scientists thought that if Khamenei would decide to build a bomb, they have to shorten the time. This is why Netanyahu said a year, more or less. This is what he said. The 2 months, listen, I don't know where it came from. And this is also connected, Najat, to the important question that you asked me about who is advising President Trump about Iran.
Exactly.
Now, my sense is that are maybe hawks and maybe the Israelis that have good connection in the White House that maybe offering that. When Trump said 2 months, Bibi chanted said yes, but Bibi said a year.
The opposite, yeah.
So I think, listen, definitely they did something that crossed the red line. I'm not saying they didn't, but I think that, taking the knowledge that they had and trying to rebuild it without testing, without anything, it probably will take them months, if not a year, to build something, And even there is a difference between building a nuclear device and building a nuclear arsenal, or building a nuclear device that you can blow in the desert, or building a nuclear device that you can put on a missile, on Shihab missile. Those stages are taking a long time, so a lot of time. So I think that the 2 months is something that I don't think actually correlates to the reality on the ground. And again, I'm not undermining that or thinking that they didn't do something that crossed the red line in terms of weaponization. I still think, like Netanyahu said, that even if they did that, they still were a year at least from the ability to build a nuclear device.
And another thing I picked up on that Knesset speech, and I found it so interesting that I wrote an article on it, was that Trump actually hinted that Jared Kushner would take on the Iran file. So he was talking about Iran and their nuclear ambitions, and then he's like, we're going to bring Jared in to get the deal done. And suddenly Jared has made this reappearance. He's been so silent in this whole second term administration. And of course, Jared, like you mentioned, like his father-in-law, he's very transactional, right? And he's got billions of dollars with state owned companies throughout the Middle East, in the billions, as I said. So what is your perception if he were to take on the Iran file? Is that more of well, it will be a transactional deal, we can buy our way out of getting Iran to negotiate, or of something like that?
Again, I think highly of Mr. Kushner, in terms of the Abraham Accords and of course the deal with the hostages. That definitely was a very important element in reaching that deal, because again, I still think that Mr. Witkoff is a good guy in his essence.
To add to that, I want to say that, a lot of the Israeli family hostages that I speak with, especially from Niroz and Kefer Razo, told me that Witkoff was always available on the cell phone, always talking, very kind and loving. Just loving towards them.
I like Israeli ministers. I didn't speak with them.
That they said the same thing. They said this, and he understood the pain of losing a son himself, that he was always there for them. And I only heard really good things from these families that I've become close with.
I agree, and he's really good guys in essence, but I don't think that he can reach a deal with Iran. I think that you need to have some other stimulator. That is why I think that Kushner getting in, very transactional, I think it's an important element. I add to that saying that I think that, the Gulf states, especially the Qataris, they need to have a lot of motivation, because I think that they're afraid that the future war that could have happened, like we discussed, will actually have some sort of spillover to them as well. So I think that the good connection that Kushner and Witkoff, especially Kushner, had in the Gulf states, UAE and Qatar, I think that will create another momentum for the negotiation. But, and this is a real but, we have to remember, we have to find some sort of a solution for the enrichment. I think that there is a path for that in terms of a consortium that they talked in the past, but you need to give something to the Iranians in terms of safe space. I said numerous times in Israel that if they'll have 10 centrifuges running or nothing in some sort of a box, who care about that? Let them do that and say, okay, we have enrichment, whatever. We have to give them something, because for the Iran, enrichment is much more than reaching a nuclear bomb. It's a part of the honor, of the dignity of a nation that invests so much in building this capacity. So I think that if Kushner will understand that, and it's a very transaction in its way, and you can find some sort of a bridge on enrichment, I think that the road to some sort of a deal is open, because I think that the Iranians, despite the war, are first and foremost prioritizing negotiation. Now the problem is that we have stalemate negotiation, we have snapback. So the Iranians are becoming very agitated, and that can lead to escalation. But I still think that there is a chance. So I think Kushner working with Witkoff, very transactional, working with the Gulf states, coming with a new idea that can bridge the gap in terms of the enrichment, and understanding that you have to have, like Hamas, in terms of safe haste that was given, in terms of, Hamas still controls some part of Gaza, it didn't dismantle immediately. So if you can give some safe haste to the Iranians, I think it can find a magical solution, because basically I really think that still Khamenei is interested in reaching a deal that lifts the sanctions.
And also, Kushner is very pragmatic. And another benefit to him, like you said, maybe Khamenei won't approve Pezeshkian sitting with President Donald Trump, but he may approve Kushner, because Kushner technically isn't an American official. So it gives him kind of that layer of plausible deniability as well.
Exactly. Definitely there is a possibility, because again, like, Khamenei said, there won't be no direct negotiation, and that Witkoff met with Arakchi. So I think everything related to the meeting part of things, I think it's they can find a solution for that. And definitely if Kushner will be there, he can meet Arakchi, like you said. He's not like official of the U.S. administration, official position. So definitely I think him getting into negotiation is an important move for those who want to see an agreement. And it's a very negative move for those who doesn't want to see an agreement. But again, I still think that Kushner is important, but the positions is more important in terms of trying to find a new solutions, creative one that can bridge a gap on the enrichment regarding Iran. That is the crucial element. Once we find this, I think the Iranians will be highly supportive in terms of the inspection, about the limitation of enrichment, the cap on the enrichment capabilities, and the number of centrifuges. Think they're already there. And again, I really think that, and I wrote an article on that, and also on Danny Council, that if Israel wants to secure the achievements of a rising liar, we have to have a negotiation and agreement, because another war can really erode our achievement. And we had major achievements in the war itself. So I think this is something that we all need to inspire. And like I mentioned, lifting sanctions in terms of blocking any path of Iran to a nuclear bomb, I think it's a good agreement. And I think that lifting sanctions will change the regime from within. It really cannot block the outside influence on the Iranian youth and population. This is why I think that reaching agreement can serve also the Israeli interest. I don't think that this government or any other government in Israel will accept this position, but this is the way I see things are moving forward, or hoping that it will move forward in that direction.
Towards a deal. And it's interesting because back in November of last year, I spoke to a man named Yale University, Jeffrey Sonnenfeld, who actually worked with Kushner on the Abraham Accords. And he said, that Kushner is the key to bringing peace in the Middle East. So hopefully we will move in towards a positive direction, as you said. Danny, is there anything you'd like to add in closing?
No, I think that, again, I mentioned that numerous times in Israel. I think that now that hopefully the war in Gaza is over, the Iranian issue is returning back to the table. It goes without saying. I think that there is a lot that need to be discussed. The Iranian activities of pushing Israel to a decision point. And I think that, again, our cooperation and coordination with the US is crucial in so many ways. But I have to say that last year I was quite sure that this year will be a decisive year, and actually the attack occurred. And unfortunately, I feel that also the next year will be decisive, because once we decided to hit Iran, where we pushed ourselves or forcing ourselves to other attacks, given the fact that the Iranians will build the capacity. I really hope that peace will prevail. There will be an agreement that will save us the need to attack again. But unfortunately, as I see things now, the Iranian issue will turn back to the table in a way that escalation, as I mentioned, is almost imminent. I hope that I'm mistaken in my assessment, but unfortunately, as I see things developing right now, escalation is just around the corner. And again, we have to look and see how things will develop in the next couple of weeks and months. And just last thing about that, we have to take a closer look about the domestic interaction and discussion within Iran. We shouldn't take it lightly. We shouldn't say, everybody is from the same regime. No. And this is typically what we're saying in Israel. It's not black and white. There are also gray colors, and we have to take a closer look, because we are getting closer to the end of Khamenei era. It goes without saying. And those discussions will have an enormous effect on the way that the Islamic Republic of Iran will behave in the future, will act in the future. So we have to pay closer look for that. And again, thank you very much, Natanz, for inviting me for this important discussion. And I hope that everyone that will listen to that will find it interesting in a way.
No, it definitely was. And I agree with you. We shouldn't just write off all those conversations as propaganda or something, and really pay attention and listen and learn. And I so appreciate your time and very insightful conversation. Thank you so much, Danny, for joining us today on Eye for Iran.
No, thank you for inviting me.
You can sign up for our weekly briefing newsletter at iranintl.com/newsletter. We deliver what you need to know with top stories, key analysis, and exclusive reports direct to your inbox. The Eye for Iran podcast series is brought to you by Iran International, your go-to destination for expert Iranian news in both Farsi and English. For more, you can head to our dedicated English website, iranintl.com/en.